You would not last a single day in 17th century London, not with the plague in the air, fire under your feet, and death waiting behind every corner. Most people today imagine old London as a place of powdered wigs, charming markets, elegant horse carriages, and gentle candlelight. But the truth is far darker, far filthier, and far more lethal. This story will drag you through the choking smoke of collapsing houses, the stench of unwashed streets, the screams of plague victims, the scratching sound of rats chewing through market stalls, and the terrifying silence that falls when even the doctors refuse to step outside. Over 20 chapters, each exploring a different hour of a single cursed day, you will experience the very conditions that made 17th century London one of the deadliest cities in human history. You will see how people woke up not knowing if they would live to see sunset, how the poor and the wealthy alike feared the invisible presence of the Black Death, how the Great Fire stalked the wooden city like a beast waiting for its moment, and why surviving even one ordinary day required luck greater than courage. This journey is not meant to comfort you, it is meant to immerse you in the chaos, danger, and despair that shaped the lives of millions who called this city home. And by the end, you will understand why you, a modern person, would survive no more than 24 hours. Hello. Welcome to my channel. Before we start, it's a good idea to get into bed and relax. I would also like to ask you to subscribe to my channel, like it, and write in the comments where you are from and what time it is. Thank you. Sweet dreams. Single rented attic above a tavern on Fleet Street, startled by a coughing fit so violent it rattles your ribs. Outside the thin wooden walls, dawn is only beginning to break, but the streets are already alive with the sounds of scraping wheels, cursing vendors, and livestock being dragged toward the market. The air you breathe feels heavy, thick with a scent that is not merely unpleasant, it is dangerous. London's morning fog is laced with smoke from coal fires, rotting waste tossed into open gutters, and the invisible breath of thousands of sick bodies. You swing your legs to the floor, but the first thing you see is a rat, a large, greasy creature, staring back at you from beneath a stool. Its red eyes glint with something close to defiance. It doesn't run. It waits, as if deciding whether you are a threat or a source of crumbs. You realize then that in this century, the rats are not afraid of people. They outnumber you. They carry the fleas that carry the plague. And in this fragile wooden city, they rule the streets long before you do. The night. You hear a tankard smash, someone shout, "Out with you, plague breeder," and then the door slams. When you open your tiny window for a gulp of air, a wave of stench hits you so strongly that you gag. The narrow alley below is lined with piles of waste, fish guts, horse dung, rotting vegetables, chamber pot contents emptied straight from windows just hours earlier. A boy, no older than 12, drags 2 dead chickens by the feet, stepping barefoot through the muck. Across the street, women scrub their doorsteps with brackish water from the Thames, hoping to wash away the smell but only spreading it around. The fog seems thicker here, trapped by leaning houses that almost touch at the upper floors. Sunlight struggles to reach the cobblestones. And yet the worst part is not the filth, it is the silence that hangs beneath the noise. A kind of tension, a waiting. Everyone knows the plague deaths have risen. Every morning brings new chalk marks on doors, lines of carts carrying bodies, and the ringing of bells. You have heard them every hour since you arrived. Ding, 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 each one marking another soul lost to fever and swelling buboes. You know that somewhere in the city, a doctor in a heavy leather coat and bird mask helmet is preparing for another day, but many more physicians have locked themselves inside their houses. Afraid. Powerless. There is no cure. There is no safety. And as you stand in this cramped attic, blinking through the dirty window, you realize that every breath you take is borrowed time. Groaning staircase of the tavern with one hand covering your mouth, but even that cannot block the smell of stale beer, sweat, and smoke that clings to every surface. The innkeeper nods at you without warmth. He looks exhausted, his cheeks hollow, his hair greasy from lack of washing. Soap is expensive, water is unsafe, and bathing is rare enough to be suspicious. A man who bathes too often is believed to be opening his pores to disease. The innkeeper thrusts a crust of dry bread into your hand, breakfast. You are expected to eat quickly and leave, because guests who linger are bad luck in plague season. As you step outside, the street greets you with a blast of noise, merchants shouting prices, pigs squealing as they are herded to slaughter, dogs barking, and somewhere a mother crying as her sick child is carried past in a blanket. The city assaults your senses from every direction. A cart rumbles by, wheels splashing through a puddle of filth that soaks your boots. Behind it follow two men ringing handbells, calling out, "Bring out your dead." The cart behind them carries the covered shapes of bodies, stacked like firewood. Some are wrapped in sheets, others in nothing at all. A young woman runs after the cart, weeping as she begs them to wait, her husband has not yet grown cold. The collectors ignore her. They must. Their orders are to take every corpse they find. Delay means infection. Infection means death. And death is the only thing London never runs short of. A priest walks by clutching a sprig of rosemary to his nose. Another man spits into the gutter, muttering that doctors are cowards. A plague doctor emerges from a nearby house, but not to help, he locks the door behind him, sealing the sick family inside. You watch in horror as the mother inside pounds on the shutters, screaming for help. The doctor does not look back. He cannot. If he enters, he dies. If he hesitates, he dies. And so London becomes a city of sealed houses, trapped families, and streets echoing with fear. You keep moving, stepping around a dead dog, sidestepping a drunk who collapses at your feet. The wooden buildings loom overhead, their upper floors so close they nearly touch, forming a canopy of darkness that traps the stink below. Laundry hangs on ropes stretched between windows. Cats leap across beams. Rats scurry in open daylight. You feel sweat gather at your temples despite the cold morning. The air tastes metallic, polluted by countless chimneys burning cheap coal. Your throat stings. Your eyes water. And yet this is only the first hour of your day. You have not yet seen the overcrowded markets, the fire traps masquerading as homes, the slums where disease spreads like wildfire, or the bridges packed so tightly with shops that they groan under their own weight. Survival here is not a matter of strength, it is a matter of luck. And today, luck is in short supply. You head east, following the flow of bodies toward the markets where half the city gathers each morning, desperate to buy what little food survives the rats, rot, and theft. The closer you get, the thicker the crowd becomes, and soon you are pressed shoulder to shoulder with hundreds of Londoners who look as though they have not slept in days. Children cling to their mothers' skirts, beggars stretch out trembling hands, sailors shout obscene jokes, and thieves slide through the mass with practiced ease. The noise rises and falls like the roar of the sea, a constant clamor of voices competing for space in the cold, heavy air. When you finally break into the marketplace, the sight before you is overwhelming. Rows of wooden stalls packed so tightly that only narrow lanes separate them, each one overflowing with fish, meat, vegetables, and bread, all in varying degrees of decay. The smell hits you like a physical blow, a mixture of brine, rot, smoke, mud, and the unmistakable sourness of disease. A fishmonger waves a half-dried herring in your direction, shouting that it is fresh enough, good enough, and cheap enough. You doubt all three claims. Flies crawl freely over the slabs of cod and eel laid out on the table, and a rat boldly snatches a piece of fish from the stall beside his. The merchant doesn't even react, he simply kicks the rat aside and continues yelling. A butcher hacks at a slab of meat with a cleaver so dull it crushes more than it cuts. Blood pools in the grooves of the wooden table and drips to the mud below, mixing with the spilled ale, horse urine, and human waste that run freely in shallow rivulets. Sellers brush filth away with the same rags they use to handle food. A woman with cracked lips and sunken eyes offers you a basket of wilted greens that look as though they were harvested weeks ago. Another vendor tries to sell you bread infested with weevils, insisting the insects add protein. You push deeper into the maze of stalls, nearly tripping over a pig's head discarded on the ground. A group of boys chase each other with sticks, weaving between the legs of adults while shouting curses. One slams into a table, knocking over a stack of apples that roll across the street. Two women immediately begin fighting over them, clawing at each other's arms, screaming that their families are starving. No one stops them. Hunger turns even mild tempers violent, and arguments escalate faster than flames in the city's dry timber houses. A constable walks past pretending not to notice. He is more concerned with avoiding a coughing man leaning against a wall, a wet cloth pressed to his mouth. People give the man a wide berth. You notice the dark swelling on his neck, a telltale sign. The market is packed so tightly you can barely breathe, yet the crowd instinctively avoids anyone showing symptoms of the plague. Fear, not compassion, rules here. The noise grows harsher. A fistfight breaks out near the spice stalls, where two sailors accuse each other of theft. A woman screams when she discovers her purse missing, and several men accuse a barefoot child before the real thief, a grown man, slips away unnoticed. Somewhere nearby, a goat bleats in distress. Vendors shout louder, trying to drown out the chaos, while buyers haggle with desperation rather than coin. The market feels less like a place of commerce and more like a battlefield where survival depends on speed, noise, and aggression. You catch glimpses of masked plague doctors weaving through the chaos, their leather coats shining with oil to repel infected vapors. They walk quickly, inspecting sick bodies, taking notes, and marking doors to be sealed later. The crowd shrinks away from them in fear, leaving pockets of space wherever they pass. But the moment they are gone, the void closes again like a wound. By midday the fog begins to lift, revealing a sky the color of wet ash. The sun is pale and distant, doing little to warm the shivering people who stomp their feet and rub their hands together as they bargain. You realize now that London's winters are not merely cold, they are biting, damp, and relentless. Every gust of wind carries with it the smell of the river, the stench of the city's waste, and the breath of hundreds of sick lungs. As you try to leave the market, you barely avoid stepping on a man collapsed in the mud, his face gray, lips blue, body shaking. A woman kneels beside him, whispering prayers, but it is clear he will not last long. Two watchmen approach, not to help, but to carry him away before he dies in the center of the market. Death, here, is an inconvenience the city must manage quickly. You turn down a narrower lane, hoping to escape the crush of people, but instead you find a row of makeshift tents, the homes of London's poorest residents. Families huddle around small fires made from scraps of wood and broken furniture, their pots bubbling with thin soup made from bones or spoiled vegetables. A young girl with tangled hair and a ragged dress approaches you with a wooden bowl, begging for anything you can spare. Her cheeks are hollow, her eyes too large for her face. You give her the bread from the tavern, and she snatches it with a speed that startles you. Before you take even 2 steps, 3 other children rush her, trying to steal it from her hands. She manages to slip away, disappearing into the maze of tents like a ghost. Deeper into the alley, a commotion draws your attention. Several men drag a heavy wooden beam to block the entrance of a house. A red cross is painted on the door, along with the words, "Lord have mercy upon us." This house has been quarantined. Someone inside is infected. A woman inside screams as the men seal the door, begging to be let out, sobbing that she is healthy. But no one believes her, and no one will risk checking. Once the cross is painted, the house becomes a prison. Food is left at the doorstep. Windows are nailed shut. Many never come out alive. As you reach the end of the alley, you pause to catch your breath. It feels heavier now, as though the city itself pushes down on your chest. The marketplace behind you roars like a hungry beast, but ahead lies only uncertainty, a labyrinth of wooden houses built so closely together that a single spark could ignite the entire neighborhood. You hear whispers of fire spreading somewhere near Pudding Lane. Not today, but soon. This city is a tinderbox. Its buildings, its people, its misery, all soaked in fear, all waiting for the moment they will burn. And you, a stranger in this world, realize with growing dread that you have survived only a few hours. The day is far from over. The dangers are only beginning to reveal themselves. And London, vast, filthy, and merciless, has many more ways to kill you before nightfall. You leave the market behind, slipping into a wider street where the air, though not cleaner, at least feels less confined. The noise follows you for a while, the shouts, the weeping, the clatter of cart wheels, but gradually it fades into the distance. Ahead rises one of London's most dangerous marvels, London Bridge, not the open stone crossing you might imagine, but a teeming, swaying marketplace built directly atop the bridge itself. In this century, the bridge is alive, a narrow, overcrowded town suspended above the swirling black water of the Thames. Wooden houses lean inward from both sides until they nearly touch, creating a dark tunnel of timber, cloth banners, and sagging roofs. The weight of the structures is so immense that the bridge groans and trembles under the pressure of thousands of feet. The closer you get, the more you feel the rumble beneath your boots, as if the river below is pulling at the stones, hungry for whatever the city drops into it. At the entrance you are swallowed by a crowd so dense it moves like a single organism. Merchants lean out of their upper floor windows, dangling baskets on ropes to sell goods without leaving their rooms. Fishwives shout down from balconies, tossing eels wrapped in paper to customers who pay by dropping coins into wooden bowls. Bakers advertise their loaves directly from their windows, the heat of their ovens turning the cramped street into a suffocating tunnel. The smell is overwhelming, hot bread, stale smoke, piss, wet fur, river rot, and underneath it all the sourness of plague that refuses to leave the city's breath. People cough everywhere. Children run barefoot, weaving through the adults, splashing through puddles of filth that drip between the houses. The bridge feels alive but unhealthy, like a creature infected from within. To your left a barber surgeon hangs a bloodied bowl outside his shop, a signal that he is offering bloodletting. Several desperate men stand in line, holding coins they can barely afford to part with. You watch as he presses a leech to a man's neck, the parasite squirming with greed as it begins to swell. Another patient leaves the shop pale and trembling, clutching a rag to his freshly opened vein. People believe that draining their bad blood will protect them from the plague. They do not know that it only weakens them further. On the opposite side of the bridge, a woman sells perfumes made from rose oil and vinegar, claiming the scent will purify the air. A queue forms instantly, not because people trust her, but because the stench here is unbearable and any comfort is worth a coin. Halfway across the bridge, you feel the structure vibrate beneath your feet. A large cart is approaching, pulled by two exhausted horses, and the crowd parts just enough to let it pass. You glance inside. It is filled with barrels of pitch and tar, materials used to waterproof ships. But the city's wooden houses use the same substances, turning every wall, every rooftop, every beam into a dry, flammable trap waiting for a spark. Someone shouts at the cart driver, accusing him of spilling tar earlier and nearly tripping a child. The man responds with curses, his voice raw from smoke. Arguments flare everywhere. People are tense, hungry, frightened. You hear rumors whispered in the crowd, that the plague numbers are rising again, that entire streets have been sealed, that the government is hiding the true death count. You hear the name of God used in panic, in pleading, in anger. As you continue forward, the light dims further. The houses on each side lean inward so tightly that only a thin strip of sky remains overhead. The river wind sneaks through the gaps, carrying with it a coldness that raises the hairs on your arms. You feel the bridge shiver again beneath your steps. It is not collapsing, not yet, but it complains like an old man burdened with too many years and too many people. A vendor shoves a skewer of roasted meat toward you, insisting you try it. You decline, suspecting that what he calls beef might not be beef at all. Behind him hangs a row of unidentifiable carcasses, their skins still attached, flies gathering in thick clouds. He waves them away with a dirty apron, but they always return. By the time you reach the midpoint of the bridge, you understand why Londoners say that crossing it is like walking through the throat of a great beast, dark, hot, foul, and alive with danger. Near the center of the bridge stands one of the most chilling sights in the entire city, the heads on spikes. These grisly reminders of punishment are mounted above the gatehouse, where the bridge narrows into a stone archway. The heads belong to traitors, thieves, rebels, or anyone the authorities wish to make an example of. Their faces are shrunken and brown, skin stretched tightly over bone like parchment. Birds peck at their cheeks. Wind whistles through their broken teeth. Signs beneath them warn of the consequences of crime, but these displays serve another, darker purpose. They remind the living how fragile life is in this century. As you walk beneath the arch, you cannot help but shudder. The smell of decay drifts downward, mixing with the river's damp breath. Beyond the gatehouse, the bridge opens slightly, revealing a view of the Thames. The river looks nothing like the majestic waterway you might picture from paintings. It is thick, dark, and sluggish, choked with waste, dead animals, and the runoff from tanneries and dye factories. Boats glide across its surface, carrying barrels, animals, crates, and sometimes bodies wrapped in cloth, taken to mass burial pits downstream. A ferryman shouts for passengers, but his boat leaks visibly, and the thought of drifting across the polluted water makes your stomach twist. You continue down the far side of the bridge, where the houses become even more crooked, leaning in strange angles as though they've grown tired of standing straight. A carpenter repairs a beam that juts dangerously over the street. Each hammer strike sends small splinters raining onto passers-by. A woman scolds him, claiming the noise will drive her mad. He shouts back that he is preventing her home from collapsing into the river. The argument draws a small crowd. Meanwhile, a chimney above them coughs out thick smoke, coating the street in soot. A sudden gust of wind sends the smoke directly into your face, making your eyes burn. As you near the end of the bridge, you pass a bakery with a line stretching around the corner. Bread shortages have become severe this season, and people clutch their coins with desperation, hoping to buy a loaf before the supply runs out. When the baker finally opens his shutters, the crowd surges forward, nearly trampling a boy who had been waiting since dawn. Shouts turn to screams as the line collapses into chaos. A constable tries to intervene but is pushed aside. Within minutes, the shop is stripped bare. Those who failed to get bread weep openly. Mothers hold their children tightly, whispering that they will find food somehow. But you see the truth in their eyes, many will not. At last you step off the bridge and onto the southern bank, your lungs burning from smoke and your ears ringing from the noise. The buildings here are larger, the streets wider, but the danger is no less. Fires start easily. Diseases spread quickly. Poverty is everywhere. And you feel the weight of the city settling onto your shoulders, pressing you down with the realization that you have survived only a few hours in 17th century London, and already, it feels like a miracle. You push deeper into Southwark, hoping the wider streets will offer some relief from the suffocating crush of the bridge, but instead you find a district that feels eerily still, as if the city itself is holding its breath. The first thing you notice is the sound, or rather the lack of it. Where the northern bank roared with markets, fights, and shouting merchants, this side is heavy with an unnatural quiet. People move quickly, eyes low, breaths shallow. Doors are shut. Windows are dark. And on far too many houses, a red cross marks the wood, drawn hastily in thick brushstrokes and accompanied by the familiar plea, "Lord have mercy upon us." You see them one after another, like wounds across the neighborhood, entire streets lined with crosses, each one sealing a family inside. Somewhere behind one of those doors, someone is dying right now. A watchman stands guard over one such house, leaning on a long staff, his expression weary and resigned. His job is simple and cruel, to make sure no one trapped inside escapes. When you walk past, he gives you a slow nod, though his eyes hold no welcome, only warning. The smell here is different from the markets. Less chaotic, yet somehow heavier, like damp cloth rotting in the dark. You hear no coughing, but you know better than to trust the silence. People inside are too weak to cry out. Beyond the sealed houses sits a row of taverns, normally crowded with sailors and gamblers, but today many doors remain closed, with signs reading, "Shut due to sickness." Those few still open host only a handful of men drinking quickly, nervously, and keeping distance from one another. Further down the street you spot a building with a white flag hanging outside, a sick house, a temporary shelter where the poorest victims of plague are sent to die. The doors are open, but no one approaches them willingly. A cart is parked nearby, already carrying 3 bodies wrapped in linen, tied at the ankles to prevent the cloth from slipping off. A woman stands beside them with her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles have turned white. You realize the dead are her family. She doesn't cry. She simply stares ahead, motionless, as though grief itself has frozen her in place. A man in a leather apron emerges from the sick house, wiping his brow. His gloves and apron glisten with oil used to protect him, though everyone knows it offers little more than a false sense of safety. He tells the woman it's time. She nods, her face expressionless, and he moves the cart away toward the burial pits. The wheels creak, and that single sound echoes down the entire street. You continue walking, stepping over a broken bucket lying in the mud. A stray dog trots past you, ribs showing beneath its fur, its nose searching for scraps. It stops briefly to sniff the base of a red-crossed door before darting away when a hand bangs from inside, a desperate plea for food or water. You freeze. The sound comes again, weak, slow, and quickly fading. No one stops. No one answers. People avert their eyes. You realize that in this century, compassion can be deadly. The further you go, the more the city feels like a labyrinth designed to trap you. Buildings tilt, leaning toward each other like eavesdropping giants. Narrow alleys twist abruptly, some ending in walls, others in dark passages that smell of mold and fear. Above you, laundry flaps between windows, but even the clothes seem lifeless, no color, no motion beyond the shallow wind. You pass a small chapel where parishioners light candles in trembling hands. A priest whispers blessings while holding a cloth soaked in vinegar over his face. The candles flicker, illuminating eyes that are red from exhaustion and terror. Every prayer sounds like a farewell. And yet, despite the dread, life continues. 2 men argue over the price of firewood. A young girl runs barefoot after a cat, giggling for a moment before her mother yanks her into the safety of the shadows. A drunkard collapses near a doorway, muttering nonsense. A midwife rushes into a house with a bundle of herbs. The city breathes, but every breath feels borrowed. You soon reach a part of Southwark known for its inns and theaters, though now both are suffering under plague restrictions. The once lively playhouses stand abandoned, their wooden frames creaking in the wind, posters peeling from the walls. What was once a place of laughter is now eerily quiet. A single actor stands outside one of the locked doors, still wearing half of a costume as if he had hoped to perform today. He stares at the empty street, defeated, clutching the mask he once wore on stage. The silence around them is suffocating, broken only by the distant rumble of carts carrying the dead. As you walk, the streets widen once more, and for a moment you think you've escaped the worst. But the relief is short-lived. A group of men approaches carrying a stretcher, the cloth covering their burden soaked through. They shout for people to clear a path. One of them, a young boy barely old enough to shave, stumbles beneath the weight and nearly drops his end. His eyes are wide with fear. You realize this is his first week on the job. He might not survive the month. The team hurries toward the river, where bodies are loaded onto barges and ferried to mass graves outside the city walls. The authorities claim the system prevents overcrowding in churchyards. But everyone knows the truth, the dead are too many, and the living too few to bury them properly. You turn down another lane, hoping to reach the safer part of the borough, but instead you find a courtyard where several people sit on the ground, too sick or exhausted to stand. A woman with tangled hair rocks back and forth, humming a lullaby to the empty air. Beside her lies a baby wrapped in cloth. You realize with a chill that the child no longer moves. A man nearby coughs violently into a rag soaked with blood. A teenager tends to him, whispering encouragement, though you can see the hopelessness in his eyes. A few chickens peck at the dirt, oblivious to the misery around them. The courtyard smells of sickness, sweat, and death, but beneath it all is a faint sweetness, the unmistakable scent of decay beginning. You force yourself to leave before the air becomes too heavy to breathe. The next street is slightly busier, filled with people trying their best to pretend life is normal. A blacksmith hammers a horseshoe, sparks flying into the street. The rhythmic clang provides a strange comfort. A seamstress works at her stall, stitching clothes with shaking hands. A baker tries to sell stale loaves at half price. Life clings to the city stubbornly, refusing to surrender even as the plague devours it. At the far end of the road you see a commotion. A group of watchmen stand around a man slumped on the ground. "Leave him," one says. "He's marked." The others step back quickly. You see the swelling on his neck, the dark blotches on his arms. He gasps for breath, reaching toward the passers-by who recoil in fear. He manages to whisper something, but no one steps forward to hear it. Within minutes, he falls still. A watchman crosses himself. Another sighs heavily, already calling for a cart. Life and death share a street here, separated only by a few breaths. You continue onward, heart pounding, realizing with a cold weight in your stomach that you have survived half a day, but London has not yet revealed its worst dangers. The sun climbs higher, but its light feels thin and powerless, unable to banish the shadows gathering in every corner. The smell of smoke is growing stronger. Somewhere, a fire has started. And in this city of timber and fear, fire spreads faster than plague. You think, for a moment, that the worst dangers are behind you, the plague carts, the suffocating alleys, the choking smoke drifting from half-burned buildings, but London does not allow its victims even a single respite. The city seems to lean toward you, closing its crooked timber streets with every step, as if it recognizes the intruder it cannot yet consume. Every corner conceals a threat. A rat emerges from a heap of rotting straw and cheese, its eyes reflecting the dim morning light, while above, a child hurls a stone at a man who coughs too loudly, the sick already hated before their bodies betray them. A woman steps from her doorway, clutching a basket of wilted vegetables, her eyes sharp as knives, and fixes you with a stare that freezes your chest. Suspicion, fear, and hunger war in her gaze. "You don't belong here," she spits. "Keep your hands hidden, or we'll say you stole." The streets are a living maze of accusation, poverty, and death, and every passerby seems ready to accuse, strike, or flee. The smell is overwhelming, a thick miasma of human waste, spoiled fish, burning pitch, and the faintly sweet scent of decay that no sunlight can dispel. Your boots sink into mud mingled with blood and offal as you push forward, stumbling over discarded refuse, broken wheels, and the occasional limp body of someone too sick to walk. A man emerges suddenly from a side alley, brandishing a stick to shoo off children from the entrance of his house, but in the chaos, he strikes you lightly on the shoulder. You apologize instinctively, only to realize he does not hear you, does not care. The city has a rhythm entirely its own, a violent pulse that beats in mud, stone, and the echo of every desperate breath. You navigate past open doors from which coughing, moaning, and the occasional shriek emerge, reminding you that death is not abstract here, it moves with every person, every breeze, every rat scuttling across rooftops. Above, balconies sag with the weight of laundry and human bodies alike, and the occasional snap of a rotten roof tile drops onto the street below with a sickening thud, startling you into a near stumble. Here, every sense is assaulted simultaneously, smell, sight, hearing, touch, even thought itself feels contaminated by the overwhelming evidence of decay and danger surrounding you. The city teaches a single lesson: no one survives unscathed, and no one can be trusted, not even the shadows that stretch across the crooked alleys in the dim, gray light of morning. The crowds grow thicker as you reach Cheapside, and the clamor is almost unbearable. Merchants shout over each other, peddling stale bread, rotten vegetables, and charred meat, while children scuttle beneath their feet, snatching anything left unguarded. A preacher's booming voice rises above the chaos, declaring God's wrath, warning of fire, plague, and sin, yet the audience is too consumed by survival to pray with him. Instead, their gaze flickers nervously toward you, a stranger whose steps seem too precise, whose face shows too little filth. A constable approaches, his leather jerkin stiff with sweat, his face dark with suspicion. "Where do you belong?" he demands, voice harsh, scanning your clothing, your hands, your posture. You stammer a response, inventing a parish, but he does not believe you. He asks for a parish token, the small wooden proof of local residency, and your heart sinks. You have nothing. Your pockets are empty, your hands unmarked, your identity invisible in a city that punishes the unknown. Behind him, the crowd begins to murmur, some mutter, "Thief," others whisper, "Plague carrier." The words strike you more violently than any blow could. Panic surges through you, and you bolt, heart hammering, lungs burning from the fetid air. The constable shouts, men in the crowd cry out, and the stampede of bodies carries you forward like a river of despair. You swerve through narrow alleys, leaping over refuse and bodies, the city itself seeming to twist and fold to slow you, to trap you, to teach you that in London, survival is never guaranteed and mercy is a currency long spent. You burst into a quieter lane lined with abandoned workshops and workhouses, your chest heaving, every breath tasting of smoke, blood, and fear. For a brief moment, it seems you might have escaped the immediate threat of suspicion, only to realize that the city itself has not stopped hunting you. Every plank, every shuttered window, every shadowed doorway seems alive with warning, accusation, and threat, and somewhere, not far ahead, you hear the faint but unmistakable creak of a cart bearing the dead, the wheels grinding like bones over stone. Your stomach twists, knowing that soon it will be your turn to be counted, measured, and weighed against death's indifferent scales. You glance toward the Thames, hoping that the open river might offer a reprieve from the suffocating menace of narrow streets, but the sight only deepens your dread. The water is dark, thick with filth, and dotted with debris, broken barrels, scraps of wood, floating animal carcasses, and the occasional body wrapped hastily in cloth, bound for mass graves beyond the city walls. Ferrymen shout across the river, their boats overloaded, rocking perilously as they load their cargo of the dead, the stench drifting upriver to mingle with the stench of the city. You follow the cries of the crowd along the bridge, and the full horror of London's suspended city strikes you. Above the Thames, London Bridge groans under the weight of its wooden houses and teeming market stalls, each structure leaning into the next until they form a dark, sagging tunnel of timber. Peddlers hang from upper windows, dangling goods to customers below, a butcher hacks meat that is already suspect, and a fishmonger throws a herring that lands near your feet with a wet slap. The smells are unbearable, burning pitch from the rooftops, roasted meat, spilled ale, sweat, and the faint, sickly odor of decaying flesh. Above it all, the wind carries the distant, high-pitched ringing of plague bells, each peal marking a death somewhere in the city. You struggle to breathe, to move, to remain unseen in this hell of commerce and death, aware that the slightest misstep could draw attention from the constables or, worse, from the desperate residents who might see you as an easy target, a stranger with pockets too empty to justify mercy. As you reach the midpoint of the bridge, the terrifying normality of death becomes almost surreal. Heads on spikes mark the gatehouse, shriveled and brown, the teeth of the executed glinting faintly, birds picking at their skin as if performing some grotesque ritual. The crowd passes them with an eerie, casual indifference. Life in London has learned to ignore horror or it will be swallowed whole. You move along, and the floorboards of the bridge groan beneath every step, as though protesting the weight of the living and the dead alike. A vendor shoves a skewer of fried meat toward you, and you recoil, realizing that hunger has overridden decency and safety. Nearby, a cart carrying barrels of tar threatens to tip into the crowd, yet the pedestrians sidestep with practiced ease. Every sound is amplified, the hammering of a carpenter fixing a sagging roof, the clanging of a blacksmith's tools, the coughing and wheezing of the sick. You realize with a shiver that even this chaos is dangerous. A single misstep could send you into the river, under a falling roof, or into the path of someone too weak, too desperate, too frightened to control themselves. The city has become a predator with many teeth, disease, filth, hunger, fire, and violence, all converging in a single, brutal lesson: survival is not given, it is taken, and often at the cost of your humanity. By the time you step off the bridge onto the southern bank, your legs trembling, lungs burning, and mind reeling, you know the unthinkable truth: you have survived only a few hours in 17th century London, and already the city has made clear that it will not let you live easily, nor for long. By midday, the air has grown hotter, heavier, and tinged with a strange metallic taste that raises the hairs on the back of your neck. The city, already suffocating, seems to lean even closer as if to crush you beneath its crooked roofs and narrow alleys. Timber-framed houses sag so sharply toward the streets that the gaps are mere inches wide, forcing you to squeeze between walls slick with smoke and soot. Every step brings a new hazard: puddles of stagnant water, discarded refuse, splinters of wood, and the occasional body left where death claimed it. Somewhere ahead, the faint but unmistakable scent of burning wood curls into the streets, curling like smoke snakes around the buildings. Flames, small at first, dance along a roofline, fed by tarred beams and dried thatch. You quicken your pace, heart hammering, as the crackle of fire reaches your ears, echoing from multiple directions. The city, densely packed and wildly flammable, transforms into a labyrinthine furnace where a single spark can consume everything. People rush through the streets, shouting, carrying buckets of water, or frantically dragging their few possessions from their homes. Children cry, mothers scream, and men shout curses at one another as panic replaces any semblance of order. Even the animals seem aware: rats scuttle frantically over the boards and gutters, chickens flap and squawk, and dogs growl nervously, their instincts sensing danger invisible to human eyes. The very air feels alive, charged with heat, smoke, and terror, as if the city itself has become an infernal beast intent on swallowing every living thing within its walls. You stumble, narrowly avoiding a falling beam, your lungs burning from smoke that cuts like a blade with every breath, and you realize that survival now depends not on your wits alone, but on speed, luck, and the cruel indifference of this chaotic, plague-ridden metropolis. Amidst the chaos, the human element is just as terrifying. A group of men drags a woman screaming from her burning home, clutching a bundle of what might be clothing, or perhaps a child, while a fire-hardened baker throws a bucket of water over a roof only for the flames to lick back greedily, consuming everything in moments. You witness a small squad of watchmen attempting to maintain order, but even they are no match for the dual forces of panic and fire. One trips and is knocked down, narrowly avoiding trampling by a fleeing crowd. The sound is deafening: screaming, shouting, splintering wood, the roar of flames consuming the beams above, and the occasional distant toll of a bell that seems to mark both time and doom. In this chaos, you realize that London's streets are a trap. Escape is difficult: the alleys twist, the bridges groan under the weight of their living and the dead, and the river seems simultaneously a path to safety and a potential grave. You glance around, trying to find a refuge, but every doorway is either sealed, engulfed in smoke, or hiding someone too desperate to care about your presence. The fire illuminates grotesque scenes: people carrying the sick through streets slick with ash, rats fleeing across the cobblestones, carts of corpses abandoned in a rush to flee flames, and every sight reinforces the brutal truth: in 17th century London, disaster multiplies, layering fire over plague, chaos over death, and fear over survival. You push on toward the riverbank, hoping the Thames might offer a temporary reprieve from the conflagration, but the closer you get, the more oppressive the city feels. Smoke drifts over the water, casting the sun into a dim orange haze that makes every movement seem exaggerated and eerie. Barges float lazily along the river, loaded not with cargo but with bodies, wrapped hastily in linen and tossed aboard as if the river itself is the city's garbage heap. The stench rises, thick and choking, mixing with the scent of burning timber and the unwashed streets. Along the quays, you witness men and women trying desperately to save what little they own, throwing wooden chests and barrels into boats, while others haul water in leather buckets, splashing against each other, shouting, and tripping over debris. The city's rhythm has become violent, unrelenting: every breath is a struggle, every footstep a gamble, and every glance a potential threat. People jostle you without apology: no one notices, no one cares, because survival has replaced decency. Somewhere upstream, a bell tolls, its sound carried faintly through the smoke, marking another death somewhere in the labyrinthine streets that are now more inferno than city. Your heart pounds as you realize that if the fire spreads further, entire blocks will vanish before the day is done, leaving nothing but ash, smoke, and ruin behind. A small alleyway offers a narrow escape, and you dive into it, barely avoiding a collapsing roof beam that smashes against the cobblestones with a thunderous crack. The alley smells of wet straw, urine, and something far fouler: disease, decay, and death in a single, palpable wave. A rat scurries past your foot, so bold it stops and peers at you for a heartbeat, as if to judge whether you belong. You keep moving, weaving through alley after alley, dodging carts, screaming vendors, and the occasional scream of someone being dragged from their home by a group of desperate survivors. Here, you see the true face of London, a city where fear has consumed morality, where survival overrides empathy, and where death stalks everyone indiscriminately. Smoke fills your eyes, so thick it stings, and your throat burns from ash and heat. The river, which seemed a possible sanctuary, now appears like a mirage, distant and inaccessible, with ferries overloaded with the dead and living alike, and flames reflecting off the water like molten fire. And yet, despite the terror, people cling stubbornly to life. A woman shields her children, a man shields his cart, a baker continues to bake charred bread amidst the chaos. You understand that resilience is born of desperation, that hope is dangerous yet irresistible. But you also realize a grim truth: for someone like you, unfamiliar, unprotected, and unprepared, the city offers no kindness, no mercy, and no pause. London has revealed its layers of death, fire, and chaos, and it is a city you could never survive for more than a day. Night creeps over London, and with it comes a darkness thicker than any you have ever known. The sun, already weak from the smoke and haze of the fires, vanishes completely, leaving only the dim glow of torches, candles, and the occasional fire still licking at a roof or corner of a building. Shadows stretch long and unnatural across the streets, turning familiar alleys into sinister corridors that seem to twist of their own accord. Every sound becomes amplified: the distant wail of a dying child, the splintering of wood, the scurry of unseen creatures across rooftops and gutters. And then you notice them, the rats. At first, only a few, darting across the streets in frantic lines, but soon their numbers swell, dozens, hundreds, as if the city itself has sent them to patrol the streets. They are bold and unafraid, nosing through refuse, leaping onto carts, even brushing against the legs of people too exhausted to notice. The smell of them is nearly as pungent as the stench of rot and human waste, a thick, musky odor that rises from the cobblestones and drains. The rats carry not only the plague that has already consumed half the city but also the primal terror of predation. Children scream as one leaps from a gutter to snatch a piece of bread, dogs bark furiously, only to flee in terror as the swarming rodents seem to command the alleyways. You push forward, heart hammering, boots slipping in mud and grime, narrowly avoiding a toppled barrel that a frantic householder abandoned in fear of fire or collapsing roof. The city has become alive in ways you never imagined. The timbered buildings groan as heat warps their beams, rats move like a single organism, and the inhabitants, driven to madness by hunger, fear, and disease, scramble and shout as if part of the chaos themselves. London has become a living nightmare, a place where every sense is under siege, and where survival is dictated by speed, cunning, and a willingness to accept horrors that would paralyze the mind in any other time. You glance at a building where a red cross has been painted. Inside, the sick lie motionless or cough weakly, their bodies already claimed by the plague. The scent of decay mingles with smoke and mud, creating a suffocating miasma that clings to your clothes, your hair, and your skin. You realize, with a chilling certainty, that the night will bring even more dangers than the day: fire, disease, rats, and desperate humans who have nothing left to lose. As you stumble through the streets, you notice the subtle ways London reshapes itself at night. Shops shutter their windows, but thieves and opportunists prowl freely, slipping through shadows like phantoms. Children, who dared to wander during daylight, are now hidden beneath staircases or dragged inside homes, their cries stifled by parents too fearful to intervene fully. You cross a bridge, the timber creaking alarmingly under your weight, the dark water below reflecting the glow of distant fires and the faint light of the moon, smothered by smoke. Rats pour from the shadows onto the bridge, moving in chaotic waves, and for a moment, you imagine being swallowed by their sheer numbers. A man collapses nearby, coughing, clutching his chest as if the plague itself has a hand around his heart. Those passing him give only a sideways glance, no one stops. Life in London is survival measured in seconds, and stopping for one person could mean death for another. You duck into an alley, pressing yourself against the wall as a fire flares down the street, illuminating the terrified faces of people dragging what little they own, children clinging to their mothers, and carts piled with the dead. You force yourself to keep moving, but your lungs burn from smoke and stench, your eyes water, and your stomach twists from hunger and fear. The darkness of night amplifies every hazard, the rats, the fires, the collapsing timber, the desperate humans, and the omnipresent plague. In this century, night is not a time of rest, it is a predator, stalking you, turning streets into traps, and turning shadows into terrors that the mind struggles to comprehend. You press on, each step a defiance of the city's cruelty, each breath a gamble, knowing that London will not relent until it has shown you, in every possible way, that survival here is fleeting, fragile, and never guaranteed. You finally emerge into a slightly wider street, where the distant sound of the river reaches your ears, a small comfort, though it carries its own horrors. The water gleams with an eerie reflection of torches, burning thatch, and the occasional shadow of a rat crossing a bridge beam. Bodies float, tossed or washed into the Thames by frantic hands, while barges, overloaded and creaking, ferry the dead to pits outside the city. The smell rises to meet you, thick and sickly, carrying with it the finality of hundreds of deaths you can see, hear, and almost taste. Yet, amidst this apocalypse, a few desperate souls continue their futile routines. A woman wrings clothes in the polluted water, hoping to salvage what she can. A man fishes with bare hands in a river thick with waste. Children peer from the quay, wide-eyed and silent, learning the harsh rules of survival too young to ever forget. The city seems to breathe around you, inhaling smoke, exhaling disease and despair. Every shadow hides danger, every corner hides rats, fire, or desperate humans, and every breath threatens to bring death. You glance behind you and see the faint glow of fires that have begun to consume entire blocks, licking at roofs and walls, threatening to spread as easily as plague. People scream, carts overturn, and the chaos seems endless. The city is no longer merely dangerous, it is a relentless, sentient predator, hungry for life in any form it can consume. You realize that the chance of finding shelter is negligible, every home could be a death trap, every alley a snare, and every path to the river blocked by flame, rats, or the sick too weak to move. The very night seems to press down on your shoulders, making the cobblestones beneath your feet slippery with ash, mud, and blood. Every step you take is measured against the city's unrelenting cruelty, and you understand that in London, no one survives simply by running or hiding. Survival requires cunning, luck, and a willpower that most cannot sustain for more than a few hours. You stumble toward a small quay where a few boats remain, the water lapping against their sides as if inviting you to escape. But the path is treacherous, a fire flickers dangerously close, rats swarm the boards, and the mooring ropes are slick with mud and blood. A man pushes past you, cursing, carrying a bundle wrapped in cloth, the smell of disease clings to him, yet no one flees, fear has dulled even instinct. You step carefully, every sense alert, noticing the faces of those still alive, hollow, haunted, desperate. In their eyes, you see the same thought that grips you: the city is relentless, unmerciful, and alive in ways that defy reason. One false move, one misjudged step, and the river could claim you, fire could claim you, or the plague could claim you. You realize that the night will stretch on, full of dangers too numerous to count, and that the faint hope of dawn offers no comfort, for by then, London may have claimed even more victims, leaving you weaker, slower, and closer to death. The rats, the fires, the plague, the desperate humans, and the thick, choking darkness of night all conspire to remind you that you would not survive a full day in this city, and even a single night could be your last. Dawn barely breaks through the thick haze of smoke, ash, and the stench of rot that has settled over the city overnight. The streets are eerily quiet now, but it is the kind of quiet that carries the weight of death, a silence heavy with bodies too weak or too sick to move, and with people too terrified to venture outside. You move cautiously through the alleys, noting the signs of the night's horrors, overturned carts, broken doors, scorched beams, and the remains of meals abandoned in haste. Rats scuttle freely, indifferent to the living and the dead alike, and even the occasional crow caws lazily, feeding on whatever the city has discarded. The faces you see are hollow, drawn tight with fear and grief. Mothers clutch children with the desperation of someone trying to hold on to life itself, while fathers sit in the shadows, staring blankly at nothing, as if the plague has consumed their very ability to think. Everywhere, death has left its mark, doors painted with red crosses, the faint smell of unburied bodies, and the occasional cart piled with the deceased waiting to be taken to mass graves outside the city. You step carefully, heart hammering, lungs burning with the thick, foul air, realizing that each breath could be your last. The city is a predator, and it is patient. Every alley, every corner, every shadow hides not just rats, fire, or collapsing timber, but the ever-present possibility of encountering someone on the edge of madness. Thieves, desperate survivors, and those too sick to know the rules of society roam freely, turning every interaction into a potential threat. You dodge a man who collapses near a puddle, coughing and hacking violently, spittle landing on the stones at your feet. The smell of his disease is pungent and immediate, and you recoil, coughing uncontrollably. London has taught you that the living can be just as dangerous as the dead, and that human behavior under fear, hunger, and disease is as unpredictable and deadly as the plague itself. You push on, your shoes slipping in mud and filth, every nerve alert, aware that in this city, even the simple act of moving forward is a calculated gamble with life or death. The main thoroughfare leads you past what remains of a marketplace, its once bustling stalls now mostly abandoned. A butcher slaps a cleaver against a bloodied block, carving meat for a few lingering customers, but the smell is overpowering and reeks of decay. It is as if the city has absorbed the stench of hundreds of deaths and condensed it into the air around you. Children peek from behind barrels, skeletal, eyes wide with a mixture of hunger and fear, while older men and women shuffle by, carrying bundles of belongings, their movements slow, deliberate, and weary. A cart rattles by, piled high with the bodies of the night, covered in hastily thrown sheets, each corpse a reminder of the fragility of life in London. You notice one body has fallen partially from the heap, a hand sticking out from the covering, blackened and bloated from disease. A wave of nausea hits you, but you force yourself to continue, knowing that hesitation could be deadly. As you make your way toward a quieter alley, you see a group of survivors arguing over scraps of bread, their faces contorted in anger and desperation. One man strikes another, sending him sprawling into the mud, and a woman screams, trying to separate them, only to be shoved aside herself. The fight is brutal, raw, and unrelenting, with no regard for sickness or safety. Survival here has stripped away every social nicety, leaving only violence, fear, and the instinct to cling to life. You glance at the walls around you, timber, brick, stone, all scorched and scarred by fire, blackened by smoke, and etched with the faint red crosses of plague victims. The city itself is a tomb, a predator, and a classroom in cruelty, teaching that each breath, each step, and each glance can mean the difference between life and death. London does not forgive mistakes, and it does not offer mercy. It only rewards those swift, cunning, and lucky enough to survive its endless, gnawing chaos. Further along, you encounter the river once more, the Thames flowing sluggishly and darkly, carrying with it the remnants of the city's overnight horrors. Dead bodies float along the current, their bloated forms bobbing against debris, while rats swim across the water's surface, feasting on whatever they can reach. The few ferries still operating are overloaded with living and dead alike, groaning under the weight, oars splashing desperately against the sluggish tide. You watch a woman attempting to push her child into a boat, but the vessel rocks violently, nearly tipping them both into the black water. Nearby, A man drags a corpse by the legs, leaving a trail of blood and mud behind him. The sights and smells are overwhelming, and your stomach turns violently, yet you know that turning away could be just as dangerous. In London, visibility and awareness are survival tools. You press on along the bank, the river at your right, the city pressing from the left, aware that escape is a relative term here. Every alley, every bridge, every street leads either to the dead, the desperate, or the fires consuming what remains of homes and shops. A stray dog darts across your path, coughing, its ribs visible beneath matted fur, and disappears into the shadows as quickly as it came. You realize that the living here are almost as hollow as the dead, driven to madness by hunger, fear, and plague. A faint breeze carries the acrid smell of burning rooftops upstream, mixing with the stench of sewage and decay, creating an air so thick it seems to cling to your lungs and weigh down your every step. The city is not merely a backdrop to death, it is a participant, moving, breathing, reacting, and punishing indiscriminately. You pass an overturned cart, its contents spilled into the mud, rotting vegetables, broken pottery, and a small bundle of cloth that might once have been a child's clothing. The grotesque tableau strikes you harder than anything before. London has claimed not just bodies, but entire lives, stories, and identities, leaving only chaos and despair in its wake. As you finally step into a slightly wider lane, you notice a few survivors huddled in doorways, faces pale and haunted, whispering prayers to gods that may or may not exist. Their eyes flick to you with suspicion and fear, calculating whether you are friend, foe, or plague carrier. The city seems to watch with them, testing, waiting, and ready to punish any misstep. You realize that even if you find food, water, or temporary shelter, the night will bring its own threats: rats, thieves, fire, the sick, and the endless, lurking shadow of disease. And yet, despite the terror, a strange, instinctive hope pushes you onward, urging you to keep moving, keep breathing, and keep surviving, even as London makes clear at every step that it offers no kindness, no mercy, and no second chances. You are small, fragile, and vulnerable, and the city knows it, a labyrinth of death and desperation where only cunning, courage, and luck determine who will see another day. In that moment, as the sun rises weakly through the smoke and ash, you understand fully why no one from the modern world could survive here. The dead and the desperate claim everything, and London, with its rats, its fires, and its plague, waits patiently to take the rest. By midday, the sun fights its way through the persistent smoke and haze, but the light offers little comfort. The streets are littered with the remnants of the night's chaos, overturned carts, charred debris, and the bodies of the dead, some partially hidden beneath straw or rotting sacks, others sprawled openly in the middle of thoroughfares. Every step is a negotiation with the city itself. The cobblestones are slick with mud, blood, and filth, and rats scurry in all directions, undeterred by your presence. The stench of decay is everywhere, rising from the decomposing bodies and mingling with the lingering smoke from burnt timber and the unmistakable sourness of human waste. It is an aroma so thick and oppressive that it seems to cling to your skin, clothes, and lungs, turning every breath into a torment. Children, skeletal and hollow-eyed, dart past, clutching scraps of bread or stolen goods, while women cry softly in corners, rocking infants whose small bodies are already fevered and weak. Men shuffle forward with empty gazes, carrying bundles that might be possessions, food, or even corpses. Their faces are etched with fatigue, fear, and resignation, evidence of long nights and relentless horrors. You feel every eye on you, every whispered suspicion, every glance that calculates whether you are a threat, a thief, or a carrier of death. In a city so ravaged, survival is a brutal calculus. Move too slowly, and the fire, the rats, or the sick will claim you. Move too quickly, and desperate humans may attack in a blind attempt to preserve themselves. You pass a small chapel where the doors are ajar, revealing rows of bodies laid out on the floor, their faces slack and eyes staring at nothing. A bell tolls somewhere nearby, resonating through the alleys, each chime a reminder of mortality. London has made it clear that life here is provisional, tenuous, and bought with caution, speed, and constant awareness. Even the wind seems toxic, carrying ash, smoke, and the mingled scent of death from one street to another, leaving no corner untouched by decay. You wonder if any place remains untouched, a haven in a city where every building, every alley, and every shadow participates in the relentless game of survival and death. The further you walk, the more insidious the city becomes. Doors that appear abandoned may conceal someone armed with desperation, ready to strike at an intruder. Windows, blackened with soot, reveal fleeting silhouettes of people sickened by plague or fever, coughing and wheezing, their bodies wasting away under the relentless weight of disease. You step over the leg of a man sprawled across the alley, his body bloated and cold, yet still twitching in the convulsions of the plague. A rat pauses nearby, sniffing the air before darting under a board, leaving you with the sickening awareness that life here exists only by preying on the vulnerable. You move past a group of scavengers arguing over a heap of refuse, their voices sharp and harsh, wielding sticks in a display of brute force. One swings at another, and the man falls into the muck, narrowly avoiding a rat that scuttles over his torso. London does not wait for politeness, decency, or mercy. It is an unforgiving teacher, punishing weakness and rewarding cunning and ruthlessness. The smell of the dead, the sick, and the smoke overwhelms you, filling your nostrils and searing your throat. You realize that every breath taken in this city is contaminated, carrying with it not only disease but the stench of human suffering and decay. The city is alive in its own terrifying way, moving, reacting, and observing, and it seems to understand instinctively that you are an outsider, unprepared, unprotected, and dangerously naive. Every turn of an alley, every crack in a wall, and every shadow cast by a burning roof reminds you that survival here is provisional, that life is fragile, and that even the most careful steps may not save you from London's myriad dangers. As you approach a narrow lane that leads toward the river, the evidence of the night's carnage becomes even more horrifying. Bodies are piled in small groups at the sides of the street, some swaddled in rags, others exposed to the open air, their faces mottled, lips blue, and limbs stiff with rigor. The rats patrol relentlessly, gnawing, leaping, and swarming as if performing some grotesque ritual. You step carefully, heart pounding, trying to navigate a path without slipping in the mud, blood, and refuse. Fires burn sporadically in the distance, sending waves of heat that mix with the stench, making breathing nearly impossible. Along the edges of the lane, the desperate scavenge for anything salvageable, bread, cloth, coins, or scraps of metal, and every movement is tense, calculated, and unpredictable. A man crouches over a body, searching pockets, muttering curses under his breath when he finds nothing of value. A woman nearby beats a child with a thin stick for attempting to take a scrap of bread. Survival here has stripped away morality, leaving only instinct, hunger, and fear as guiding principles. You glimpse a group of men fighting over a cart of corpses, shoving and striking, indifferent to the risk of plague or injury. Every glance around you warns that London is not merely dangerous, it is sentient in its cruelty, observing, testing, and punishing the unwary. You notice the faint glimmer of the river beyond the alleys, but the path is treacherous. A fallen roof beam, a pile of refuse, or a swarming rat could end your escape at any moment. The sound of coughing, moaning, and screaming carries on the wind, each note a reminder of the fragile line separating the living from the dead. Smoke curls around buildings, obscuring vision, and forcing you to rely on instinct to navigate the labyrinthine streets. The city has become an inescapable predator, relentless in its pursuit of life, indifferent to pleas, prayers, or panic. Each breath you take is a gamble, each step is measured against the threat of fire, disease, rats, or human violence. You realize that even if you reach the river, even if you escape the alleyways, survival is not guaranteed, for London's influence stretches beyond sight, into every corner, every building, every shadow, and every heartbeat. By the time you reach the edge of a small quay, the sun has climbed higher, but the heat is oppressive, mixing with the smoke and stench to form a suffocating shroud. You watch a boat groaning under the weight of bodies, both living and dead, rocking dangerously in the murky water. The few surviving ferrymen shout orders, arguing over who should board first, their faces drawn tight with exhaustion and fear. The current carries floating corpses past you, some unrecognizable, some with eyes staring vacantly, all a testament to the indiscriminate nature of London's cruelty. The faint reflection of fire dances across the river, mingling with the black water, and you understand that the city is not merely a place of death, but a force, alive, patient, and unyielding, claiming every opportunity to crush the unwary. You clutch your stomach, lungs burning, vision blurred by smoke and tears, and understand fully why no one from another time could endure this place for even a single day. Every sense is assaulted, the eyes, nose, ears, and skin all overwhelmed by filth, decay, and horror. London is a predator and a prison, and by observing its streets, you see that survival is not a right but a constant, exhausting negotiation with chaos. The city will not forgive, will not pause, and will not yield, and you understand that in this landscape of death, the line between the living and the dead is measured not by morality, but by cunning, speed, and the cruel, indifferent forces of a city that thrives on suffering. By the late afternoon, the weight of the day presses down with a suffocating intensity. The streets, already foul with refuse, blood, and the remnants of the night's chaos, grow darker and more menacing as the sun begins its descent, filtered through smoke and ash that have settled over the city like a shroud. Every alleyway is a potential trap, every doorway might conceal someone too desperate, too hungry, or too sick to care about your existence. The rats, emboldened by the diminished daylight, move in throngs, their tiny claws clicking on the cobblestones as they scurry over discarded refuse and fallen timber. The smell of decay is nearly unbearable, thick and pervasive, permeating everything, the walls, the ground, the air. You pass a collapsed cart where a man lies sprawled, coughing violently, his eyes wide with fever, the hand of death already creeping over his pale skin. Children cling to their mothers, their bodies skeletal, their eyes reflecting a world that has long since abandoned innocence. The city itself seems to be breathing around you, the groan of sagging timber, the crackle of distant fires, the whisper of wind carrying ash and the scent of corpses. Even the ground beneath your feet feels treacherous, slick with mud, blood, and excrement, a physical reminder that London offers no safe footing, no respite, and no mercy. Each step is a negotiation with survival, one miscalculation, one misjudged corner, and you could be trapped between fire and rat, disease and desperate human, life and death. You notice the red crosses marking plague houses, each one a silent scream of despair, warning the living to keep their distance. Some houses are abandoned, but even the empty ones feel alive with the echo of suffering, the shadow of the sick, and the persistent, lingering threat of infection. London is not just a city, it is a predator, patient and methodical, weighing every living thing in its labyrinthine streets, deciding who may pass and who will fall. The further you move, the more the city reveals its cruel logic. A baker kneels in a doorway, sweat mixing with soot and ash, shaping charred loaves that barely resemble bread. Children press against walls, scavenging, silent and watchful, their thin hands snatching anything edible or useful from discarded piles. You glimpse a man arguing with another, sticks raised, their eyes wide and untrusting. A shove is enough to send one of them sprawling into a heap of garbage, rats swarming immediately. The air is thick with tension and menace, every glance must be calculated, every movement deliberate. You step cautiously past a group of sickly individuals, coughing and hacking, some leaning on one another, others collapsed completely, their breath shallow and weak. The sound of a distant bell, tolling perhaps for another death, reverberates through the streets, each peal a cruel reminder that mortality stalks every shadow and alleyway. The river is nearby, but even that sanctuary offers no guarantees. Overloaded ferries, floating corpses, and disease make the water as dangerous as the streets. London is a predator whose teeth are made of fire, plague, rats, and human desperation, and it has taught you a grim truth: no modern preparation can grant immunity here. Each alleyway, every plank of timber, every shadow is a potential harbinger of death. By the time you reach a slightly wider thoroughfare, the sun low in the smoky sky, you realize that this city does not merely house the dead, it worships them, feeds on them, and surrounds every living soul with reminders of their fragility. London is patient, relentless, and ever hungry, and those who enter its streets must understand that survival is measured in seconds, every breath a borrowed gift in a city that has no mercy. You take a moment to catch your breath in a narrow alley, the walls blackened from recent fires, the ground slick with mud, filth, and the refuse of countless human lives. A rat scurries past, its eyes gleaming, unafraid and unrelenting, a tiny embodiment of the city's ruthless ecosystem. You notice a group of women huddled near a doorway, rocking children and muttering prayers to gods that may not hear them. Their faces are drawn tight with fear and exhaustion, skin pale and clammy from fever or the constant stress of surviving each day. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, decay, and smoke, and you gag as a sudden gust brings ash into your throat, choking you for several heartbeats. A man collapses nearby, groaning, clutching his chest, and you step back instinctively, fearful that the disease he carries could strike you with a single careless contact. Around you, the city hums with its lethal energy, rats in the gutters, fires still burning in sporadic patches, and the faint moan of the dying echoing from shuttered houses. Every element of the city conspires to remind you that life here is precarious, fragile, and temporary. As you move toward the river, the smoke from distant fires curls across your path, turning the world into a landscape of gray and orange, distorted and surreal. You realize that the city's streets, alleys, and open spaces are alive with danger, not just fire or rats, but the silent, invisible threat of plague, the sudden violence of the desperate, and the exhaustion that erodes every reflex and decision. The river offers a tenuous promise of escape, yet even here, survival is uncertain. Ferries overload with bodies, living and dead alike, rocking dangerously as desperate hands push and shove to secure a place on board. You see a man collapse under the weight of his burden, only to be left behind by those too consumed with their own survival to care. Children cling to their parents, weeping quietly, their small forms almost swallowed by the chaos around them. You take another step, cautiously approaching the quay, and notice the water carries floating corpses and debris, a grim reflection of the city's unrelenting hunger. Smoke curls across the surface, flames flicker in the distance, and the stench of decay is almost unbearable. London is not merely a city, it is an ecosystem of suffering, each element, fire, plague, rats, hunger, human desperation, interacting to maximize chaos and claim life. You realize fully that your presence here is an anomaly, a foreign body navigating a place that consumes recklessly, without pause or thought. Every sound, every movement, every step carries risk. One misjudged motion and the city could take you, as it has taken countless others before you. You are exhausted, lungs burning, vision blurred, mind reeling, yet you press on, understanding that London offers no reprieve, no safety, and no mercy, and even a single day here is more than most could endure. By late afternoon, the sun has grown low and dim, filtered through London's persistent haze of smoke, ash, and dust. The streets are still, but only superficially, beneath the silence lies a restless, lurking chaos. Hunger hangs heavily in the air, almost as tangible as the stench of rot, fire, and excrement that permeates the city. The citizens you encounter are gaunt, skeletal figures who shuffle with slow, deliberate movements, their eyes hollow, reflecting a world stripped of mercy and nourishment. Children beg quietly, clutching scraps of bread or stolen vegetables, their voices tiny in comparison to the distant roar of fire and the rustle of rats in the gutters. You pass a man gnawing on a charred scrap of wood, muttering under his breath, unmindful of the plague that twists his body and the fire that threatens the nearby buildings. The signs of starvation are everywhere, bloated bellies from disease, thin limbs from neglect, and a collective desperation that drives even the most cautious to acts of violence. You step over a collapsed woman, her child clinging to her shoulder, eyes wide with terror, and you realize that in London, hunger is more lethal than most diseases, more capable of eroding sanity than even the plague itself. Every movement, every glance, every footstep is a negotiation with the city's merciless logic: survive or perish, act quickly or be overtaken by the living dead that desperation has created. The further you move, the more evident the madness becomes. A man sits in the corner of a scorched alley, mumbling incoherently to himself, staring at nothing, while rats scurry around his feet, ignoring him as if recognizing a kindred spirit in his descent. Nearby, a group of scavengers argue violently over scraps, sticks swinging, curses shouted, and blows landing with brutal precision. The smell of burning wood mixes with the coppery tang of blood and the unmistakable stench of decay, forming an aroma so thick it seems to cling to your lungs. Children press against walls, eyes wide and unblinking, observing the chaos around them with a detached, almost learned caution. Mothers whisper prayers to gods long absent, rocking infants too sick to cry, while fathers move listlessly, their will broken by exhaustion and fear. Even the rats seem aware, darting with precision, feeding off the filth, and avoiding confrontation with the strongest humans, yet the city's rhythm ensures that confrontation is inevitable. London is a predator that teaches the young, punishes the weak, and observes the clever, all without bias or mercy. You feel each heartbeat hammering in your chest, each step a dangerous gamble, and each breath a calculated risk, for the stench of hunger, disease, and death penetrates every sense. The city is alive in its cruelty, thriving on the suffering of all who dwell within, indifferent to prayers, pleas, or moral considerations. You understand with grim clarity that survival here is not granted, it is stolen in moments of quick thinking, courage, and luck, and even then, it is never secure. As evening approaches, the shadows grow long, and with them, the city's dangers seem to multiply. The fires that burned sporadically through the day now flare more intensely, casting grotesque light and dark shapes across the streets. Smoke curls along the rooftops and drifts into alleys, making every movement an exercise in both caution and endurance. The hunger driving the living has transformed them into unpredictable predators. A woman lunges at a man for a morsel of bread, a child snatches a scrap of clothing from another's bundle, and a group of men fight over a cart abandoned in haste, their desperation raw and visible. You step carefully, heart racing, as the stench of decay and disease clings to the air, making breathing a torment. Every shadow seems to conceal a threat, every alley a trap, and every stray movement carries risk of injury or infection. You realize fully that London is not merely hostile, it is an ecosystem of suffering, where fire, plague, hunger, and madness intersect to create a living horror. Rats, ever present, move without hesitation, scurrying over corpses, discarded food, and even humans too weak to resist. The cries of the hungry, sick, and desperate echo through the streets, overlapping with the distant roar of flames and the occasional toll of a bell marking another death. The city seems to mock those who dare to traverse its labyrinth, each street a gauntlet, each alley a challenge to both body and mind. You push toward the river again, hoping for some semblance of escape, yet the Thames offers only partial solace. Floating bodies drift past, some bloated, some disfigured by disease, while overloaded ferries struggle against the current, filled with both living and dead. You glimpse a child clutching a mother's hand, their faces pale, eyes wide with terror, yet still pressing forward in a desperate bid for survival. Even the water carries danger, rats swim along its surface, disease seeps into every puddle, and the unstable, overcrowded boats threaten capsizing with each push or shove. Smoke curls over the river, casting a sickly orange hue that blends with the reflection of distant fires. You understand with absolute clarity that London offers no comfort, no safety, and no mercy. It is a city that thrives on fear, hunger, and chaos, rewarding only those who are swift, cunning, and lucky enough to navigate its deadly streets. Every moment is an exercise in vigilance, every step a negotiation with survival, and every breath a confrontation with the omnipresent stench of death. In this landscape of hunger and madness, you realize why no one from another era could endure even a single day. London is a predator, a teacher, and a grave, and its lessons are written in the suffering of every living soul who dares to tread its crooked, plague-ridden streets. By late afternoon, a relentless wind sweeps through London, carrying embers and smoke that make the city feel as if it is alive and breathing fire. The infernos that began in scattered buildings now spread with terrifying speed, consuming entire blocks in minutes. Timber-framed houses, stacked impossibly close, ignite like kindling, flames leaping from roof to roof with horrifying efficiency. The heat is almost unbearable, radiating through the streets and forcing people to stumble blindly, coughing and gagging on the thick, choking smoke. The screams of the terrified fill the air, women clutching children, men dragging carts of meager possessions, and the sick too weak to escape, calling out for help that will never come. Smoke obscures vision, turning even familiar streets into a disorienting labyrinth of shadow and flame. You move as quickly as your exhausted body allows, narrowly avoiding collapsing roofs, falling beams, and the occasional fire-engulfed cart careening down the street. The heat sears your skin, the smell of burning wood and human flesh assaults your senses, and the chaos all around seems endless. Rats scatter frantically, sensing danger and moving with unnatural coordination, slipping through the legs of the fleeing populace, indifferent to the human suffering enveloping them. The city itself seems alive in its cruelty, reacting with precision to the panic and chaos of its inhabitants, and you realize fully that survival here is not determined by strength alone, but by cunning, awareness, and pure luck. Amid the smoke and fire, the human cost becomes painfully evident. Mothers wail as children are pulled from burning homes, men scream in futile attempts to save belongings, and others collapse in exhaustion, coughing and choking as the flames roar closer. Fires leap unpredictably from one structure to another, sending splinters of timber raining down onto the streets below. You see the shadows of people reflected in the flames, distorted and grotesque, each movement a desperate act of survival. Some attempt to fight the fires with buckets of water, only to see the liquid evaporate instantly in the intense heat. Others scramble over rooftops, trying to reach safety, while below, the streets are clogged with the living, the dying, and the already dead. Even the churches, which once served as places of refuge, have become prisons, their wooden doors warped by heat, trapping those seeking shelter inside. You stumble past a heap of charred debris where a man lies motionless, his face obscured by soot and smoke, and realize that in this city, fire is indiscriminate, it claims the weak and strong alike, the guilty and innocent, the healthy and diseased. The wind carries the flames forward, bending and twisting them into strange shapes, illuminating the terror in every eye, and London becomes a living furnace, testing the limits of endurance, sanity, and courage for every soul still moving through its streets. You push onward, the roar of the fires filling your ears, the heat radiating from every direction. The cobblestones beneath your feet are slick with ash, mud, and water, making each step treacherous. A cart loaded with goods collapses into the street ahead, scattering debris and forcing you to leap aside to avoid injury. Smoke blinds your eyes, stings your throat, and fills your lungs with every breath, leaving you coughing and gasping as you struggle forward. The wailing of people trapped or fleeing their homes mixes with the crackling of flames and the occasional groan of collapsing timber, forming a symphony of terror that presses on your mind and body relentlessly. Rats scurry across your path, fearless and purposeful, their numbers seemingly endless as they move in search of food, shelter, or perhaps the last vestiges of sanity in a city gone mad. You pass a small alley where the walls glow red with fire, and through the smoke, you glimpse a family trying to escape, a mother dragging two children while the father attempts to lift an elderly relative. The flames leap, forcing them to retreat, and you watch in horror as the fire swallows one of the buildings entirely, flames bursting through the windows with a roar that shakes the very ground. The air is thick, heavy with ash, smoke, and the unmistakable smell of burning human flesh. Each breath is a gamble, each step a test of your endurance, and each glance a reminder that the city does not forgive mistakes. Even the river, which had seemed a distant sanctuary, offers no immediate reprieve. Smoke and embers drift across the Thames, igniting small fires along its banks. Boats struggle against the current, overloaded with people and possessions, groaning and creaking under the weight. The water is dark and sluggish, carrying debris, corpses, and refuse from the streets upstream. Rats swim across the surface, fearless in their search for sustenance. Children cling to parents, their small faces pale and eyes wide with terror, while adults struggle to maintain composure, moving with a desperate energy born of fear and survival instinct. Every moment is a negotiation with danger, the fire, the smoke, the collapsing buildings, the frenzied crowds, and the omnipresent rats. London, in its entirety, has become a predator and a prison, testing the limits of human endurance, cunning, and courage. You understand fully why even a single day in this city would break all but the most fortunate and prepared souls. The fires consume everything indiscriminately, leaving nothing untouched by heat, smoke, or death. And as the sun dips lower, casting the city in a hellish glow, you realize that in London, the night will only bring more danger, more chaos, and more relentless, unforgiving terror. Survival is not promised, it is fought for with every ounce of strength, every breath, and every step through a city that does not forgive, does not pause, and does not relent. Night falls over London like a suffocating shroud, thick with smoke, ash, and the lingering stench of the day's horrors. The streets are barely visible beneath the dim light of torches, flickering fires, and the occasional glow from buildings still smoldering. Shadows stretch and twist across the cobblestones, making familiar alleys unrecognizable, turning the city into a labyrinth of fear and uncertainty. The sounds of the city are amplified in the darkness, the crackle of flames, the groans of the dying, the scurrying of rats, and the low murmurs or frantic cries of the living. Every corner could conceal danger, a collapsing structure, a rat swarm, or a desperate human driven mad by hunger and disease. The smell of decay is overwhelming, clinging to your clothes, hair, and skin, infiltrating every breath with the stench of rot, smoke, and excrement. You move cautiously, heart hammering, lungs burning, and mind alert to every sound. The fires from the day have left some streets impassable, forcing you to navigate narrow, winding alleys where the threat of ambush, collapse, or contagion is constant. Shadows flicker as rats move across the walls, over beams, and through gutters in seemingly coordinated swarms, indifferent to human suffering. Even the faint glimmer of moonlight is polluted by smoke, casting eerie shapes across the city and giving the impression that the darkness itself is alive, stalking you with intent. You realize with a chilling certainty that London's night is as dangerous, if not more so, than its day, and that every step, every glance, and every breath carries risk. The city is patient, relentless, and merciless, a predator that has no compassion, no pause, and no limit to its cruelty. Survival requires more than speed or cunning, it demands constant vigilance, nerve, and the willingness to confront horrors that would shatter the mind elsewhere. As you move deeper into the darkness, the human element of the city becomes ever more pronounced. Figures move silently through alleys, hunched over, shuffling with skeletal frames, their eyes wide and untrusting. Children cling to parents, whispering prayers in hushed tones, while adults carry bundles of possessions or bodies, the weight of life and death pressing down on them in equal measure. Fires flare sporadically, casting grotesque light across broken streets, and every flicker reveals another scene of despair, a collapsed man, a woman screaming over a dying child, a cart overturned with corpses spilling onto the cobblestones. Rats scurry over everything, feeding on what remains, indifferent to the terror surrounding them. The sounds of coughing, moaning, and occasional wails echo through the alleyways, blending with the crackle of fire and the low murmur of the wind. You pass a small chapel, its doors ajar, revealing a handful of the sick and dying inside, huddled together in fearful silence. Even sacred spaces offer no protection here, London's terror does not discriminate. Each movement through the streets is a careful negotiation with the city itself, a contest of observation, timing, and survival instinct. You understand fully that night in London is a predator, stalking every shadow, testing the endurance of all who remain, and ensuring that even the slightest lapse can result in immediate death. The streets are alive with danger, and the city whispers constantly that survival is temporary, fragile, and never guaranteed. The further you move, the more palpable the sense of predation becomes. Fires illuminate the twisted shapes of people fleeing, carrying what they can, dragging the sick, and shouting over the roar of the blaze. The smell of burning wood, smoke, and human flesh is oppressive, mingling with the stench of rot from the streets and river alike. Rats move in relentless waves, darting through debris and across bodies, their small, beady eyes glinting in the dim light. Children, skeletal and pale, peek from corners or press against walls, observing the chaos with an almost unnatural caution, their survival instincts honed far too early. Adults are driven either by desperation or madness. A man strikes another over a scrap of bread, a woman screams as her child is nearly crushed in a crowd, and the sick cough violently, their bodies racked by disease, barely able to move. The city is no longer a collection of streets and buildings, it is an ecosystem of horror, feeding on the living, the dying, and the dead alike. Every breath taken here is a gamble with plague, smoke, or the unseen dangers lurking in every shadow. You stumble over debris, narrowly avoiding falling beams, and feel the heat of flames lick your skin from only a few meters away. Smoke stings your eyes and lungs, each step becoming more exhausting, each heartbeat louder in your ears. Even the river, your distant hope of escape, reflects the chaos, floating corpses, debris, and overcrowded ferries that groan under their human cargo. Rats swim across the water, indifferent to human life, and the occasional flare of fire along the bank signals further destruction. You press onward, heart hammering, lungs burning, mind focused entirely on survival. Every alleyway is a test of observation, every step a negotiation with danger, every glance an assessment of threats. The darkness magnifies the city's cruelty, turning ordinary shapes into potential hazards, and shadows into predators. You realize that London's night is a predator without mercy, teaching that survival is not a right, but a constant struggle against fire, plague, starvation, rats, and the madness that hunger and fear have sown in its inhabitants. Even the most cautious, strongest, and clever of souls would find it impossible to rest here. Every moment is fraught with peril, and each second could be your last. The city does not pause, does not forgive, and does not tire. It continues to test every living being within its walls, ensuring that even the brave and fortunate must constantly adapt or perish. As the flames flicker and smoke curls across the streets, you understand fully why you would not survive even a single day in 17th century London, and that the night alone is enough to break body, mind, and spirit. The city waits, patient and relentless, and its lessons are written in ash, blood, and the hollow eyes of those who have already fallen. As the night deepens, London transforms further into a city ruled by shadows, fire, and the ever-present gnawing of rodents. The fires have consumed entire blocks, leaving timber skeletons and walls blackened with soot. Amid the chaos, rats move freely, their numbers now terrifyingly immense. They swarm in alleys, through abandoned homes, and across the streets, feeding on what remains of both the living and the dead. The air is thick with smoke, ash, and the pungent stench of decaying flesh, making each breath a test of endurance. You move cautiously, trying to avoid stepping on rats or the bodies they disturb. Some move with shocking boldness, even climbing over those still alive, gnawing and biting without hesitation. The city seems to pulse with their movement, the collective scurrying forming a sinister symphony that accompanies the cries and moans of terrified humans. Every corner you turn offers a new horror, a heap of corpses disturbed by rats, a mother huddled with a child, the remains of a fire still smoldering, and shadows of figures that may be alive, or may already belong to death. In this city, you understand, survival is not just about avoiding the plague or fire, it is about avoiding the myriad predators, both human and animal, that thrive in the chaos. London has become a place where instinct, speed, and nerve dictate who lives, and even the slightest hesitation can be fatal. Rats crawl over roofs, squeeze through cracks, and emerge from gutters with unerring precision, exploiting every weakness in human defenses. The city has become a predator in layers, where fire burns, disease kills, and rats strip away dignity, flesh, and hope alike. Amid this horror, you glimpse the desperation of the remaining humans. Families clutch what little remains of their belongings, pushing carts filled with rags or bodies, shielding children and the sick with frantic energy. The cries of the hungry and dying echo through the streets, each sound blending with the hiss and click of rodents moving unimpeded through the alleys. A man collapses near a pile of garbage, coughing violently, rats immediately swarming to feast. Children watch silently from behind barrels, wide-eyed and skeletal, learning early that caution and speed are the only allies in this city. You step carefully around a collapsed roof beam and over a fallen cart, noting the red crosses on doors signaling houses claimed by the plague. The signs of the dead are everywhere, and the rats seem to claim what humans leave behind. London is no longer a city, it is a living, breathing ecosystem of fear, death, and hunger, where rats and humans alike are actors in a constant struggle for survival. Every step, every glance, every decision is critical. You realize with absolute clarity that even the cleverest, most prepared outsider could not endure this environment for long, the relentless, coordinated chaos of rats, fire, plague, and desperate humans ensures that life is fragile, temporary, and never safe. You continue down a narrow lane, the walls on either side blackened by fire and smoke. Rats pour from cracks in the stone, climbing over charred beams and scavenging the remains of the dead. A sudden crash from a nearby building sends debris into the street, scattering rats in a wave that surges like a tide toward you. You jump aside just in time, heart pounding, lungs burning from smoke, and realize that the rats are not merely scavengers, they are predators, fearless, and emboldened by the weakness and panic of humans. A mother shrieks as a rat darts past her child, teeth glinting in the flickering firelight. The screams echo, blending with the hiss of flames and the moans of the dying. The city seems to shift around you, walls crumbling, fires leaping unpredictably, and rats moving with uncanny coordination through the wreckage. Even the Thames, flowing dark and sluggish nearby, reflects a world consumed by horror. Bodies float past, some bloated, some partially eaten, while overloaded ferries groan under the weight of the desperate and diseased. Smoke drifts over the water, carrying ash and the faint tang of human flesh, painting the river with the unmistakable mark of devastation. You understand that there is no sanctuary here. Every alley, building, and street is equally fraught with danger, and even the slightest misstep can result in immediate death. The human survivors you encounter are shadows of their former selves, driven by hunger, fear, and the primal instinct to cling to life. Some fight violently over scraps of food, sticks raised and eyes wide with desperation, others cower, silent and resigned, aware that in a city dominated by fire, plague, and rats, hope is fleeting. You navigate the streets carefully, stepping over the bodies of the dead and the dying, noting the once familiar landmarks now twisted by destruction and chaos. Even churches and chapels, intended as sanctuaries, have become arenas of desperation and disease, filled with the sick and starving, their cries lost amidst the roar of the fire and the scurrying of countless rodents. Every movement you make is an exercise in vigilance and endurance, as London has made clear that only the alert, the swift, and the fortunate may survive. The fires, smoke, rats, and disease form a perfect storm of terror, ensuring that life is fragile and fleeting. As night presses on, you realize fully that the city has evolved into a predator unlike any other, relentless, patient, and indifferent to the suffering it inflicts. Even the strongest, cleverest, or most prepared would find it nearly impossible to endure. London has taught you a grim lesson: survival here is temporary, precarious, and demanded with every breath, every step, and every heartbeat. The rats, ever present and ever hungry, are the ultimate proof that the city is alive, thriving in chaos, and consuming all who dare enter its dark, twisted streets. As the night grows deeper, you make your way toward the Thames, hoping that the river might offer some semblance of escape from the horrors that have consumed the city. But the river, too, has become a conduit of death, carrying with it the remnants of London's devastation. Floating bodies drift past, some bloated and pale, others already partially devoured by rats or the water itself. Debris, charred wood, overturned carts, fragments of possessions, and refuse, clogs the surface, creating a treacherous obstacle course for anyone daring to approach. The stench of decay is overpowering, rising from the water in waves that choke the lungs and cling to the skin and clothes. The cries of those still clinging to life mingle with the hiss of fire from the distant city, the scurrying of rats along the banks, and the soft, mournful lapping of the river itself. Ferrymen, gaunt and skeletal, struggle to keep their boats afloat, their faces etched with exhaustion, fear, and grim determination. They shout orders to terrified passengers, urging them aboard, pushing, shoving, and sometimes striking, as the river itself threatens to claim them. The water reflects the glow of fires along the banks, flickering like a hellish mirror, revealing the chaos and destruction that has engulfed everything. Even here, at the supposed edge of the city's terror, there is no safety. Every step toward the river is fraught with danger. Misstep, fall, or a careless movement could land you in the water among corpses, rats, and the desperate masses. London has ensured that escape is never simple, never guaranteed, and that even the river carries the weight of death. The human toll is staggering. Families clutch one another, dragging the weak and sick to the boats, their eyes wide with terror, their bodies shaking with exhaustion. Children cry silently, too weak or terrified to scream, while adults curse, plead, or strike in frantic attempts to survive. You step carefully over a partially submerged corpse, feeling the river's cold water lap at your shoes, as rats scurry across debris and swim with startling agility toward whatever food or flesh they can find. The cries of the living, the moans of the dying, and the hiss of rats merge with the roar of distant fires, forming an overwhelming symphony of death. Even the ferrymen, accustomed to danger, move with deliberate caution, aware that one wrong choice could send them into the river's black, contaminated waters. London has made it clear that survival is not a right, it is a temporary, precarious state, held by those willing to risk life and sanity against overwhelming odds. You realize fully that the city has consumed the day, the streets, and the night itself, and that even the water, the symbol of possible escape, is tainted with the omnipresent stench of death, disease, and despair. As you step onto the quay, the full scope of the river's horror becomes apparent. Floating bodies drift past, arms and legs askew, faces frozen in terror or contorted with pain. Rats swim across the surface, leaping from corpse to corpse, gnawing, feeding, and vanishing again into the dark water. Ferries, groaning under their human cargo, rock perilously, their timbers creaking ominously with every wave. People push, shove, and sometimes fight to gain a place on board, while those too weak or too late are left behind, collapsing onto the quayside among debris and corpses. Fires along the banks cast flickering shadows across the river, illuminating the desperate struggle of those trying to survive and highlighting the grotesque forms of bodies drifting downstream. The air is thick with smoke, ash, and the acrid tang of death, making every breath a laborious challenge. You move carefully, aware that one misstep could send you into the black water, where rats, currents, and disease await indiscriminately. London, even at its water's edge, has transformed into a predator without mercy, testing endurance, nerve, and luck in every heartbeat. The chaos along the river is relentless. Children cling to parents, mothers scream, fathers fight, and the sick collapse, coughing violently, their bodies racked by plague or exhaustion. Rats swarm along the quay, over bodies, under feet, fearless and precise, taking what they can. The city's firelight reflects in the dark water, creating distorted, terrifying images of the dead, the dying, and the desperate, a mirror to the horror engulfing the streets. Even those aboard the ferries are not safe, the vessels creak and sway, overloaded, while rats scuttle across their decks, gnawing at the supplies and occasionally at the passengers themselves. The water itself seems alive, a black mirror of London's cruelty, carrying away the weak and leaving only those willing and able to fight for life. You understand, with an unshakable certainty, that London does not forgive, does not pause, and does not relent. Its lessons are written in ash, blood, the hollow eyes of the dead, and the black waters of the Thames. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat is a test, and the river, which should symbolize escape, instead becomes yet another instrument of terror, reinforcing that survival is temporary, precarious, and dependent on a constant negotiation with a city that has become a living nightmare. In this moment, you understand fully why no one could endure even a single day in 17th century London. The streets, the fires, the rats, the plague, and the river itself conspire to ensure that life is fleeting, terrifying, and never safe. As night deepens, a chilling realization settles over the survivors. The fires, the rats, and the chaos were only part of London's cruel design. The plague itself waits silently, invisible, yet omnipresent, its grip tightening on every breath, every movement, every living soul daring to remain in the city. The fevered groans echo through narrow alleyways, carrying the unmistakable signs of death approaching, swollen faces, blackened swellings, and the rattling coughs of those already succumbing. You move cautiously, the weight of exhaustion pressing on every limb, yet even the nimblest step feels like wading through invisible quicksand. The streets, slick with mud, ash, blood, and refuse, are treacherous in the dim firelight and torch glow. Rats scurry across your path, unbothered by the humans stumbling through the chaos, while the occasional stray corpse drifts into view, a reminder of the plague's silent and unrelenting force. Children cling to parents with trembling hands, mothers whisper frantic prayers, and fathers groan under the combined weight of their own terror and responsibility. Even the fires cannot distract from the insidious, invisible threat wrapping around every living being. London's night is no longer defined merely by sound or sight, it is the oppressive, unrelenting awareness that death may strike silently, anywhere, at any moment. The plague moves with precision and patience, unseen yet relentless, a predator that does not need speed or fire, for its lethality is measured in every breath you take. The city has become a cage of despair, and the human psyche frays under the weight of constant vigilance. Survivors move through the alleys like shadows, cautious, tense, and terrified, eyes scanning for threats both seen and unseen. Feverish individuals stagger, coughing violently, leaving behind the unmistakable scent of decay, sweat, and death. Rats navigate around the living as if aware of the invisible danger, their tiny claws clicking against wet cobblestones, occasionally scattering in panic at some unseen stimulus. Smoke from distant fires curls through the streets, carrying ash that coats faces, hair, and clothes, further blending the line between survivor and corpse. The river, black and sluggish, reflects the orange glow of burning buildings and the movement of frantic humans along its banks. Even here, the plague is a silent observer, waiting for a careless breath, a shared touch, or a momentary lapse of caution. London's cruelty is comprehensive, the fire destroys the present, the rats strip away dignity and flesh, and the plague silently ensures that even survival comes at an unbearable cost. Every step forward is an assertion of will, yet even the strongest and most determined feel the creeping, gnawing inevitability of death pressing close. The city has become a predator without mercy, a teacher of suffering, and a judge of endurance, and you realize with cold certainty that no one could survive more than a few days under its grip, and even a single night could be enough to break body, mind, and spirit. The streets are eerily quiet in some places, yet that quiet is only a prelude to terror. You stumble past a row of abandoned houses, doors ajar, interiors blackened by fire, the smell of rot and death thick in the air. Inside, figures lie huddled in fevered delirium, their breathing shallow, bodies swollen, faces etched with agony. Even from a distance, the sounds of the dying reach your ears, coughs, groans, faint cries, reminders that death is never absent in this city. Outside, rats continue their relentless movement, climbing over bodies, debris, and scorched beams, their numbers overwhelming and unstoppable. Fires flare unpredictably along the streets, casting grotesque shadows that exaggerate the terror in every corner. Children and adults alike stumble through the smoke, coughing, gasping, and shivering, caught between flame, plague, and the gnawing of the rodents that dominate the streets. The red crosses on doors mark the homes claimed by the plague, but even unmarked buildings offer no solace. Disease travels invisibly, carried by air, contact, and the bodies of those too weak to resist. Each breath you take feels poisoned, each step potentially fatal, and each glance around the corner might reveal a new horror ready to strike. Desperation pushes survivors toward the river, seeking refuge, yet even there, the plague lurks. Overcrowded ferries, floating debris, and drifting corpses make escape uncertain. Children cling to parents, huddling for warmth, safety, and reassurance that no longer exists. Adults push and shove, some screaming, some silent, all terrified, their eyes reflecting exhaustion, horror, and an understanding that every second in London could be their last. The river is a thin, precarious line between fleeting hope and inevitable death, its dark waters reflecting the fires, chaos, and endless suffering. Rats swim effortlessly among the debris, fearless, calculating, unrelenting. The city, the plague, the rats, and the fires have merged into a single entity of terror, a predator that encompasses every aspect of life and death. You realize with stark clarity that survival is never guaranteed in London, that the plague will claim bodies without mercy, and that even the strongest and most prepared will find their resolve tested to the limits of endurance. London's grip is unyielding, and the lesson is absolute. In a city where fire burns, rats feast, and plague silently kills, no soul could survive even a single day unscathed, and the living must navigate a world where every moment carries the weight of mortality, despair, and terror. By the time the night has fully descended, London has transformed into a city unrecognizable to any sane observer. The streets are no longer merely pathways but battlegrounds, arenas where fire, plague, hunger, and madness collide with unforgiving force. Smoke curls from smoldering ruins, filling the air with ash and the acrid tang of burning wood, while the faint, sickly light of dying fires casts grotesque, ever-shifting shadows along the alleyways. The cries of the sick and starving echo constantly, mingling with the distant toll of church bells marking deaths, forming a terrifying symphony of despair. Rats move in synchronized swarms, gnawing, leaping, and scuttling through the debris, undeterred by fire or human presence, their small claws clicking against wet cobblestones in a rhythm almost deliberate in its precision. You move cautiously, every step calculated, knowing that a single misstep could bring death through collapse, fire, disease, or the sudden violence of a desperate human. Children huddle against walls, gaunt and wide-eyed, too weak to cry, yet still watching, learning, and surviving. Mothers clutch fevered infants, whispering frantic prayers, while fathers stagger, carrying bodies or dragging carts loaded with what little remains. The city is a predator of multiple layers, hunting with claws of fire, teeth of rats, and the invisible hand of plague. Every turn in the street brings fresh terror. A man collapses mid-step, coughing violently, his body racked by the plague, and the rats are instantly upon him, gnawing at flesh already weakened by disease. A pile of debris shifts under the wind, threatening to crush the unwary, while the distant fire sends a shower of embers across rooftops, igniting structures that were barely intact. Survivors move with animal-like vigilance, aware that even the slightest pause could mean death. Some fight violently over scraps of food or a place in a safer alley, others cower silently in corners, resigned to whatever fate may come. The air is thick with the stench of smoke, decay, human waste, and disease, making each breath a laborious act. London no longer resembles a city, it is a living nightmare, a labyrinth designed to test every instinct, every ounce of endurance, and every shred of sanity. Even the bravest, most clever, or fortunate among the living are subject to the relentless pressure of this environment, where madness spreads as surely as the plague, and desperation transforms ordinary humans into predators themselves. Every step taken is an assertion of life, yet one miscalculation can bring you face to face with death in its most unflinching, unrelenting form. As you move deeper into the heart of the city, the chaos intensifies. The fires have become widespread, casting the streets in a hellish glow that flickers and shifts with the wind. Timber-framed buildings, some already weakened by fire or age, collapse with thunderous force, sending clouds of dust, ash, and debris into the alleys. Screams of the trapped echo through the darkness, mingling with the low, constant groan of the dying and the frantic cries of the desperate. Rats swarm in every corner, climbing walls, leaping across streets, gnawing at the bodies of the dead, the sick, and occasionally the living. The city pulses with life in its own terrifying rhythm, the fires burn, the plague spreads invisibly, and the rats hunt in the shadows. Survivors press forward, gaunt, fevered, exhausted, and trembling, yet still determined to cling to life in a city that has become a predator unlike any other. The wind carries the stench of death and fire, burning eyes and lungs with every breath, while shadows shift and distort, turning even familiar alleys into places of dread and uncertainty. Mothers whisper prayers, children cling desperately, and men fight or flee in ways that are equal parts instinct and madness. Every movement must be deliberate, every glance calculated, and every breath measured, for London tolerates no carelessness. You stumble past a burned-out building, the faint glow of fire illuminating a family huddled against a wall, coughing violently, skin marred by plague. Rats scurry across their feet, indifferent to the living terror around them. Fires flare unpredictably nearby, sending embers scattering across the street, igniting piles of debris or weak structures. The red crosses on doors, once clear warnings, now blur into the smoke and shadows, signs of death that are omnipresent and unavoidable. Even the most cautious and prepared survivor cannot escape the full force of London's cruelty. Plague, rats, fire, hunger, and human desperation all converge here, forming a perfect storm that tests every instinct and every nerve. As the night stretches on, you feel the oppressive weight of the city pressing on your mind, your body, and your spirit. London has become a predator, patient, relentless, and merciless, and its streets are a gauntlet that claims the weak, punishes the careless, and forces even the strongest to confront the fragility of human life. Every step taken is an act of defiance against a city that thrives on death, every breath a fleeting victory over the plague, fire, and madness, and every heartbeat a testament to the sheer will required to endure even a single night. In London, survival is temporary, tenuous, and uncertain, and the streets themselves serve as an unending reminder that no one could endure even a single day unscathed. As the first hints of dawn attempt to pierce the thick, smoke-filled skies, London remains a city in the grip of relentless horror. Fires, still burning from the night, illuminate the streets in an eerie, orange glow, flickering across walls blackened with soot and ash. The cries of the dying, the coughing of the fevered, and the rustling of rats create a relentless, nightmarish symphony that shows no sign of abating. The river reflects the chaos, dark and sluggish, littered with bodies, debris, and rats swimming undisturbed among the floating corpses. Survivors move through the streets like shadows, gaunt, feverish, and trembling, constantly alert to the myriad dangers around them. The plague continues its invisible march, claiming bodies silently, while rats scavenge, hunt, and feed with an almost unnatural coordination. Fires leap unpredictably, consuming structures already weakened by age, neglect, or previous flame. The city itself feels alive in its cruelty, reacting to every sound, movement, and breath with precision, ensuring that even the most cautious cannot avoid its relentless judgment. You step carefully, lungs burning with smoke, heart pounding, realizing that every step forward is both an assertion of life and a negotiation with death. London has become a predator without equal, it burns, it bites, it infects, and it drives its inhabitants to the brink of madness. The human element is no less terrifying. Families cling together, dragging children, the sick, and the weak through narrow, treacherous alleys. Mothers whisper desperate prayers, their voices barely audible over the cacophony, while fathers groan under the combined weight of terror, exhaustion, and responsibility. Children, pale and skeletal, watch the chaos with wide, unblinking eyes, learning far too early the harsh lessons of survival. Rats move fearlessly among them, crawling over feet, gnawing at corpses, and occasionally attacking the living who linger too long. Even open squares, which once served as places of gathering, are now scenes of terror, smoldering debris, charred bodies, and the restless shadows of the dying. London has stripped away civilization, leaving only the primal struggle for life amid fire, disease, hunger, and predation. You feel the oppressive weight of the city pressing on every sense, every thought, and every step, as the realization sinks in, there is no safe path, no sanctuary, no reprieve from the relentless horrors. The light of dawn offers little comfort, it merely illuminates the vast, unending suffering that has consumed the city. You push forward toward the river once more, hoping for even a fleeting chance at survival. The quay is littered with bodies, debris, and rats, moving in waves across the broken cobblestones, fearless, efficient, and unrelenting. Ferries rock under the weight of desperate passengers, some injured, others sick with plague, and the rest too exhausted to resist. Cries of terror and pain echo as someone falls into the water, immediately swallowed by both the current and the opportunistic rats swimming nearby. Smoke and ash cling to the air, coating skin, clothes, and hair, mixing with the scent of burning wood, decaying flesh, and human waste. You step carefully, eyes scanning constantly for the next threat, heart hammering, every muscle tense with the primal instinct to survive. The river, though offering the illusion of escape, is no sanctuary, it carries the dead and dying, debris and rats, reflecting the city's cruelty in black, undulating waters. Survivors cling to boats and to one another, hoping that the fragile vessels can carry them beyond the grasp of fire, plague, and madness. Every movement is calculated, every step a gamble, as London exerts its unyielding pressure on all who remain. The culmination of night's horrors becomes undeniable. The city, once vibrant and alive, is now a living nightmare where fire, disease, hunger, and rats converge to test every human instinct, every ounce of courage, and every fragment of sanity. Families, children, the sick, and the desperate move through streets that no longer recognize the rules of order, safety, or mercy. Rats swarm over bodies, fires flare unpredictably, and the plague silently claims more victims with every breath. The weight of hopelessness presses on your chest, and yet, instinctively, you continue forward, knowing that in London, survival is a series of fleeting victories, temporary and fragile. Even as dawn weakly pierces the smoke, it illuminates not salvation, but the relentless devastation that has claimed so much, lives, homes, and the very semblance of safety. London has proven itself merciless, a predator beyond comprehension, where the weak perish, the cautious teeter on the brink, and the strong survive only through luck, cunning, and unyielding will. In this city of fire, plague, and rats, you understand fully why no one could endure even a single day unscathed, and that every breath, every step, and every heartbeat is a battle for survival against the all-consuming grip of the 17th century metropolis. The last light may rise over the city, but it offers no comfort, only the stark, unflinching truth of London's cruelty, and the brutal reality that survival here is a fleeting, fragile, and almost impossible victory. By the 19th hour of this unending nightmare, London has become a conflagration of unimaginable horror. Fires rage unchecked, consuming entire streets, their glow illuminating the terrified faces of survivors struggling through the ash-choked air. Timbered houses collapse with thunderous crashes, sending flaming debris into the narrow lanes, crushing those unfortunate enough to be in their path. Smoke and embers swirl like malevolent spirits, stinging eyes, scorching lungs, and forcing every step to be measured against potential catastrophe. Rats, emboldened by hunger and opportunity, move in relentless swarms, gnawing through anything in their path, the dead, the sick, the frantic living, and even weakened animals dragged into the chaos. The plague, invisible yet omnipresent, claims bodies silently, coughing, fever, and blackened swellings mark its victims before they succumb entirely. You stumble over debris, lungs on fire, heart pounding, mind teetering on the edge of panic, acutely aware that each breath could carry the invisible hand of death. Families push past one another, dragging children, the elderly, and the sick through streets that offer neither safety nor respite. Mothers cry, fathers shout, and children stare wide-eyed, their innocence devoured by the city's unrelenting cruelty. London is no longer a city, it is a living predator, breathing fire, disease, and despair, orchestrating chaos with precision, and ensuring that even the nimblest, smartest, or most vigilant cannot escape its deadly embrace. Every turn presents fresh terror. A building partially consumed by flames collapses, sending embers scattering across the street like a hailstorm, igniting nearby debris. Rats pour from gutters and cracks in the walls, feeding on corpses and the wounded alike, seemingly immune to the heat and chaos around them. The Thames, usually a silent sanctuary, reflects the inferno and carries a procession of corpses, debris, and frantic survivors trying to cling to life on overcrowded ferries. Children clutch their parents with trembling hands, men push and shove, some striking one another for space or scraps of provisions. The sick stagger through the streets, coughing violently, bodies marked by the plague, their weakness making them easy prey for rats and human desperation alike. Smoke obscures vision, fire turns familiar streets into unfamiliar mazes, and every shadow hides a potential hazard. You realize that London has evolved into a predator of many layers. Fire destroys, plague kills invisibly, rats devour relentlessly, and desperation drives humans to violence against one another. Survival is no longer a matter of caution alone, it is a relentless, nerve-wracking negotiation with every element of a city that has become a machine of terror. The river, once a faint glimmer of hope, now carries the full weight of the city's horrors. Overloaded ferries groan, their timbers straining under desperate passengers clutching what remains of their belongings, dragging sick children or the fevered elderly aboard. The black water is thick with floating corpses, debris, and opportunistic rats swimming with fearless precision among the drifting bodies. Smoke curls across the surface, carrying the smell of burning flesh and decay, mixing with the stench of waste and rot. Even here, the plague claims its victims silently, a cough, a fevered tremble, a sudden collapse, and life is extinguished without ceremony. Survivors cling to every fragment of hope, yet the city ensures that even the smallest measure of comfort is temporary. Fires flare unpredictably along the banks, rats swarm across the decks, and the feeble light of dawn does little to illuminate a way forward. London has become a predator unlike any other, patient, methodical, and indifferent to suffering. Every breath is a risk, every step is a decision weighed against multiple threats. Amid this chaos, the last threads of human endurance are tested to their limits. Families huddle, exhausted and fearful, whispering prayers, recounting memories, and struggling to maintain coherence amid unimaginable terror. Some strike out in violence, desperate to secure a place on a ferry or a patch of relative safety. Others stumble, coughing violently, collapse, or scream in horror as rats scurry over their bodies. Fires leap from rooftops, consuming structures that might have offered refuge. Alleyways are blocked with debris, corpses, and scorched possessions. The plague's grip is everywhere, invisible yet absolute, claiming victims even as survivors cling to the thinnest strands of hope. The city's cruelty is total: fire consumes, rats devour, disease kills silently, and human desperation drives chaos further. You understand with piercing clarity that survival here is not granted, only wrested moment by moment through nerve, instinct, and relentless vigilance. London teaches, in the most brutal of ways, that even a single day is nearly impossible to endure unscathed, and that the city's inferno, plague, and predatory creatures leave no room for complacency, mercy, or rest. The night may be ending, the dawn may be approaching, but London remains a predator, patient and relentless, its streets alive with the echoes of death, despair, and terror, and you grasp fully the enormity of the horror any living soul must face to survive its grip. The final night descends upon London with a weight unlike any before. The city, already scarred by fire, plague, and chaos, seems to breathe in the darkness, exhaling despair and death into every street, alley, and building. Fires flare and die unpredictably, casting flickering, grotesque shadows that turn familiar streets into twisted corridors of terror. The cries of the dying, coughing of the fevered, and frantic screams of the desperate echo ceaselessly, mixing with the relentless scurrying of rats who have claimed the city as their own. The Thames, black and sluggish, reflects the inferno in distorted patterns, carrying corpses, debris, and rats downstream, indifferent to the suffering of the living. Survivors stumble through the streets, gaunt, trembling, and feverish, hearts pounding with the knowledge that even a single misstep could be their last. Every building is a potential death trap, charred beams collapse without warning, flames leap unpredictably, and the walls themselves groan under the weight of destruction. The plague creeps silently through the night, claiming bodies without ceremony, leaving only the pale, fevered, and terrified to navigate the city's relentless, predatory labyrinth. You feel the oppressive weight of the city pressing on every nerve, every breath, every movement. London is alive, patient, merciless, and all-consuming. The human element of the horror is overwhelming. Mothers clutch children, whispering frantic prayers in the smoke-choked air. Fathers stumble under the weight of the sick and dying, shouting for help or striking in desperation. Children huddle against walls, skeletal and silent, learning the brutal lessons of survival far too early. Rats swarm over corpses, scuttling over feet, climbing walls, and gnawing at the living if they falter. The fires illuminate scenes of devastation and desperation, casting grotesque reflections across the streets and alleys. Even open squares, once places of gathering, are now theaters of horror. Smoldering debris, bodies, and the restless shadows of the dying fill every visible space. Every step forward requires vigilance, every breath carries danger, and every heartbeat is a battle against the city's predatory forces. London has stripped humanity bare, leaving only the struggle for survival against fire, disease, rats, and madness. The night presses in from all sides, and even the first hints of dawn offer no comfort, only illumination of the full scope of death and destruction that has claimed the city. In the heart of the chaos, the river becomes the final stage of terror. Overcrowded ferries groan under the weight of exhausted survivors, carrying children, the sick, and the fevered across waters teeming with corpses and opportunistic rats. The current pulls at the fragile vessels, threatening to capsize them at any moment, while embers and smoke from distant fires drift across the decks. Those left behind on the quay scramble desperately, trying to find a foothold among debris, corpses, and the gnawing claws of rats that will consume without hesitation. Even here, the plague claims its victims silently, turning the living into corpses with frightening speed. The city offers no sanctuary, no mercy, and no relief, only the relentless assertion of its power over every human, every creature, and every breath. Every movement is a gamble, every choice could mean survival or instant death. London's final night has condensed all its horrors into a perfect storm of fire, disease, starvation, human desperation, and predatory rats. The city has become a living entity of terror, testing the limits of endurance, nerve, and instinct in a way that no mind could fully comprehend until experienced. You move along the quay, lungs burning from smoke, heart hammering in rhythm with the chaos around you, fully aware that this night will claim those who hesitate, falter, or simply run out of luck. Fires flare unpredictably, collapsing structures send debris hurtling into streets, and rats swarm in uncountable numbers across every surface. The plague silently tightens its grip, taking those already weakened or exposed, while human desperation drives the living into one another with feral violence. Children cling to parents, mothers whisper frantic prayers, fathers push and shove to protect the fragile hope of survival. Every breath taken here is an act of defiance, every step is a negotiation with death itself. As you glance toward the river, the black water teems with corpses, debris, and rats, a mirror reflecting the city's cruelty and indifference. London has left no safe place, no corner untouched by fire, plague, rats, or human desperation. The final night is a culmination, a relentless proof that survival in 17th century London is fleeting, fragile, and nearly impossible. Even those who endure until dawn must reckon with the city's omnipresent terror. This night, more than any other, reveals why no soul could survive even a single day unscathed. London claims all, body, mind, and spirit, with merciless precision, leaving only those whose will and luck defy the unimaginable odds of this infernal city.